بعد أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة واركعوا مع الراكعين صلى الله عليه. All praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given us the ability to come and learn our deen. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on His great ni'mah and His great blessing to have keenness and endeavor and zeal to learn deen is rewarding in itself. When a person sets foot out to seek knowledge, then Allah Ta'ala rewards them more. So it's a great blessing that we are here tonight to learn about a very, very important obligation of Islam known as zakat. And if you attended today's khutbah, I was speaking about the functionality of zakat and how zakat is on a functional level, and how zakat serves to be a solution for the society's problems and the economic problems that the world is facing today, especially poverty. Tonight, inshallah, we will go deeper into the subject of zakat and how a person must discharge their zakat, who must give zakat, what are the conditions that make zakat farad and mandatory on an individual, how much zakat they must give, when they must give it, what are the conditions of the wealth, which assets are zakatable, which assets are not zakatable. Inshallah, we'll also learn about the nisab, how much a person must have in their savings for zakat to be farad upon them. We'll also learn about the specific rulings related to the nisab. If a person has a specific amount, but then that amount dwindles or goes down during the year, decreases, then how much zakat is due when the due date arrives, so on and so forth. We'll also learn about debts, and if a person has a debt, then when is zakat due upon him? And some other contemporary issues that we may be facing in terms of zakat, like our mortgages and things like that. So if a person has mortgage and zakat due upon him or not, we're going to discuss that too, inshallah. Also the masarif of zakat. Masarif means those individuals who are eligible to receive zakat, avenues in which zakat can be spent. So what are those avenues in Sharia? And how do we know of those avenues, and what are the finer details about those particular avenues? This is called masarif of zakat. Then we will also learn about zakat on IRAs and 401k plans, inshallah. So I know some people do have IRAs, so that's why we need to discuss this, inshallah. Okay, right. The term zakat itself, what is the definition of zakat? What is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in making zakat farad upon the believers? What is the status of zakat in terms of its classification? How is zakat classified in Islam? And what are the consequences of one that does not give zakat? So the presentation is divided into a few headings. First, inshallah, we'll speak about the definition of zakat, what zakat actually means, what's the linguistic meaning of the term zakat, and what's the technical definition of zakat, what's the shari'i and legal definition of zakat. The wisdom, history of zakat, obligation of zakat, meaning its classification in fiqh, and consequences for not fulfilling it, and some glossary of necessary terms. So the definition of the term zakat. What does zakat mean? The term zakat itself, what does it mean? The literal meaning of the term zakat is to increase or to grow. Zakat can mean to increase or to grow or to flourish. And it's also used to denote purification. Zakat can also be used as purification. In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Whoever purifies zakah, zakat, tazkiyah, zakat comes from the same root. Whoever purifies it, his heart, he has succeeded. And whoever defiles it, he has failed. So zakah can mean to purify, it can also mean to increase, it can also mean to grow or to flourish. Also in Surah Al-A'la we say, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى. He who has zakka, tazakka, he who has cleansed his heart. heart has succeeded. Also, the term zakah can be used to describe somebody's intelligence. Zaki means an intelligent person. Also, it can have a connotation of piety and purity when a person lives a pure life, or innocence in character. Like Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Kahf, أَقَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا زَكِيَّةً بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ. Remember the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khadir, or is it Khadir? What happened with Musa alayhi salam and Khadir killed one child. And Musa alayhi salam couldn't hold back. So he asked the question, أَقَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا زَكِيَّةً بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ. Are you going to kill an innocent nafs when it hasn't done anything wrong? لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا. You've done something really bad. And then Khadir said, أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. Did I not tell you that you can't be patient with me? You don't have the patience to stay with me. So the term zakah has been used there as zakiyya, which also means innocence in character, piety, purity. What is the technical definition of zakah? If you understand this technical definition of zakah in shara, how zakat is defined, it will help you understand many of the rulings of zakah. So let's remember this technical definition. It means to transfer ownership of a specified portion of wealth from a specified portion of wealth to a specified person. It's very simple. Transferring ownership. What does that mean, transferring ownership? It means you no longer have any role or any function in this wealth. Tamliq means to make the person owner doesn't belong to you anymore. You don't have any right to do tasarruf. Tasarruf means to make any dealings in this world anymore. So tamliq man means you make somebody transfer ownership of wealth, specific amount to a specific person. Okay. So transferring ownership of a specified portion means a portion such as 2.5%. From a specified amount of wealth that has reached nisab, the quantum, and we'll go through what nisab rate is. Yeah. From specific wealth, not all wealth is zakatable. There has to be specific types of wealth that are zakatable. To a specified person, one of the 8 recipients of zakat. Are we understanding this technical definition? It's very simple. Transferring ownership of a certain amount of money, 2.5%, from a specified amount, a zakatable asset, to a specified person. It's very, very simple. Subject to the conditions specified by Sharia. For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, the niyyah is always to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The intention is always to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course, discharging the obligation of zakat. So why is this called zakah? Because it purifies and cleanses the wealth that remains. Remember, zakah is the portion of money that doesn't belong to us. It's the portion that Allah Ta'ala has designated for other people. It's the rights of other people. Therefore, that wealth doesn't belong to us. When we discharge that zakah, it purifies the remainder of the wealth that we have. Sadaqah plays its role. Charity cleanses the wealth that we have. Allah Ta'ala says, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. Allah Ta'ala says, take from their wealth charity that will cleanse their wealth and will purify it. So this is the effect of zakah when a person discharges their zakah. And it also saves the community from calamity. If a community is not discharging their zakah correctly, then Allah Ta'ala's calamities will come upon. Allah will send calamities upon them. And this is very important for us to understand. Okay. Now, you may hear some other terms, and I think it's important for us to discuss these terms. You will hear sadaqah, zakah, zakatul mal, sadaqatul fitr. You hear lillah, these different terms. Sadaqah is the most broad term. All of these categories come under sadaqah. Sadaqah is charity. In general, charity is sadaqah. Now, when it comes to charity, there are certain charities that are mandatory, certain charities that are not mandatory. From the mandatory charity, there is zakah, and there is also charity that must be given for a person who cannot fast in Ramadan, fidyah, or a person that gives kafara in expiation for a fast that was deliberately broken. That is also called mandatory sadaqah. So, like I said, sadaqah is a very broad term under which you have different categories, subcategories. And the first one is zakah, which is a mandatory charity. And then you have, of course, the other types of mandatory charity that I just explained to you. And then you have some charities which are preferable. They're not mandatory, but they are encouraged, which we usually use the term sadaqah for, or in the masjid we use the term operations, like operations. Okay? So this is not a mandatory sadaqah, but it's a preferable sadaqah, and it's encouraged. And there are different rulings for these. You may ask the question, charity is charity. No, there are different rulings. Because mandatory charity can only be given in certain avenues. And general sadaqah can be distributed very generically. So that's why we have to make this distinction. And the term that we frequently use in our countries back home is lillah, lillah, lillah. This is also sadaqah. Lillah is just a generic charity that is given to the masjid or to an institution without any obligation, without it being mandatory. It is known as lillah. Now, why is sadaqah called sadaqah? The sadaqah comes from the root letter sad, dal, and qaf, which forms sidq. When formed together means sidq. Sidq means truthfulness. So when a person gives charity, he is proving his faith. That's why sadaqah is known as sadaqah. Udhiyah, which we give in Eid al-Adha when we sacrifice an animal, this is also sadaqah wajibah. It's a type of sadaqah wajibah. Of course, there's different opinions amongst the fuqaha about udhiyah, who should give it, and does each person who owns nisab give udhiyah, or is it just the head of the household that gives udhiyah on behalf of his whole family? There's a huge difference between Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and other fuqaha. But we discussed that when Eid al-Adha comes, inshallah. Yeah. So what you give for construction of masjid, construction of schools, hospitals, etc., usually is sadaqah. It's a generic charity that we give. It's not zakah. Zakat al-mal is not used for these subjects, inshallah. Now, what are the wisdoms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in obligating zakah? Why did Allah ta'ala make zakah obligatory on people? Number one, to decrease the difference between the wealthy and the rich. Although wealth comes from Allah, richness is from Allah, and also poverty is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's Allah Ta'ala's system that He has created some rich and some poor. Allah Ta'ala didn't intend to create equality when it came to wealth. That wasn't Allah Ta'ala's objective. That's why we see Allah Ta'ala's distribution. It's different. Some people have a lot, some people have less. Some people work extremely hard and they get very less. Some people inherit everything from their oil-rich parents. So that's Allah's distribution. We don't have any say in that. You know, who inherited that, why he inherited that, and why did this person get money? Why can't I have money? Why does this person own something? Why can't I own this money? That's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has more, who has less. But what it does do, it brings about some balance and stability in society when people are given zakah. Also, it protects the wealth from all types of calamities. This is a spiritual benefit. We believe that when a person gives zakah, Allah Ta'ala protects his wealth. Also helps the needy, purifies the person of miserliness. So it's a tazkiyah for a person. Zakah is a tazkiyah. Zakah is a cleanser for a person's internal miserliness and sickness that he has. And every human being has some element of greed in them. Every human being has some element of greed in them as well. Greed and stinginess. So zakah gets rid of this. Also, it creates generosity. When a person gives, then he becomes generous. It's also a gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the wealth that Allah has given. Previous nations also gave zakah. Islam. So the ulama, to reconcile between the opinions, to cut a long story short, the best way to understand this is zakat was obligated in Makkah, but the details were revealed in Medina. Meaning before Hijrah and after Hijrah. Not specifically Makkah and Medina, but let's say before Hijrah, zakat was obligated, because the verses that speak about zakat come with the verses that speak about salah, and salah was obligated when? In Makkah life. Before Hijrah. When Rasulullah went for Mi'raj. When he went for the ascension. So zakat was obligated early, but the actual details of zakat were revealed in the Nabi's Medinan life. So that's the second year after Hijrah. The details were sent down. Now, in the 9th year of Nabi's Hijrah, 9th year after Hijrah, so one and a half years before he passed away, zakat was actually established and implemented as a system where the head of state would appoint a collector that would go and collect the zakat. And that was a system in a Muslim government, a Muslim state, that a person would be appointed to go and collect the zakat money, who is known as Amil. Not that Amil. Which Amil am I talking about? Not that Amil, the one who writes Tawiz. I'm doing a different Amil. That Amil makes a lot of money, by the way. More than the zakat collector. It's a good progression if anyone wants to take it up. The Amil makes a lot of money. Depending on which type of Amil he is. A good right one, or is the bogus one. And you see what used to happen in Islamic states was, because a person was designated for zakat collection all year round, and that was his actual job, he would go to towns and villages and collect people's zakat, livestock, agriculture, whatever it was, because even on agricultural products people used to have to give zakat. If it was, if they used to grow, harvest, different types of wheat and barley and things like that, they would give 10% if there was no work from themselves. It was just natural rain coming down, they didn't do much. And if they had to do their own efforts and make their own effort to do something, there was only 5% they would have to give. There was also collecting that sort of wealth and livestock. People had animals, then depending on how many animals they had to give some zakat as well. Whether they wanted to give animals or they wanted to give something else in its place. They could give gold in its place or silver in its place in exchange, substitute. So the person used to go out all year round, and that's what he used to do. That's why one of the recipients of zakat is Amil. Amilina alayha, Allah Ta'ala says, people that go and collect the zakat wealth. Then the question arises, that now in the 21st century, we don't have a Muslim state here anyway. And we discharge our zakat to X, Y, and Z organization. Right? We have relief organizations. I'm not going to name any because I don't want to get specific. But we have relief organizations in the States that are collecting people's wealth, whether it's sadaqah, zakat, udhiyah, and they're distributing in Muslim lands, or even locally sometimes to brothers and sisters in this country that are underprivileged. So can they collect zakat money? And if they are collecting zakat, can they pay their employees with zakat money? That's another discussion. Inshallah, when we come to Amilin, we'll discuss that. I'm not saying everything, you don't need to listen out, inshallah. So the classification of zakat in Islam, is it sunnah, is it farad, is it mustahab, is it wajib? What is the classification? It's farad. It's absolutely farad. There's no two ways about it. This is farad from the Quran, farad from the sunnah, and farad by ijma' and the consensus of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, so on and so forth, right from the earliest generations to today. Okay. Allah Ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran zakah and salah together approximately 32 times. All the books of hadith have chapters on zakah and its obligation. The Sahaba are of the consensus that whoever denies zakah, war will be waged against them. This was made a point by Abu Bakr as-Siddiq in his Khilafah, when a people, a specific tribe, refused to give zakah because the Rasul was not here anymore, we don't need to give zakah. The zakah was not a fariḍah in time of Rasul only, it was a fariḍah even after the time of Rasul. If somebody denies the obligation of zakat because you're denying a farad, then you leave the fold of Islam. Denying a farad like this, one leaves the fold of Islam. This is very severe. يوم يحمى عليها في نار جهنم فتكوى بها جباههم وجنوبهم وظهورهم هذا ما كنزتم لأنفسكم فذوقوا ما كنتم تكنزون. Allah Ta'ala says, those people that hoard gold and silver and do not spend it in the way of Allah, give them the glad tidings. Allah Ta'ala says, it's an irony. Allah Ta'ala says, give them the glad tidings of a severe punishment. On that day, it would be heated up in the fire of hell. The wealth that they hoarded would be heated up in the fire of hell. And then it would be branded their sides, their backs, their foreheads would be branded with the same wealth that they hoarded. This burning hot wealth would be branded like an iron on their heads. Allah Ta'ala will then say, هَذَا مَا كَنَزْتُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ. This is what you hoarded for yourself. Now taste what you hoarded. Now taste what you hoarded. When it comes to money matters, we have to be very, very cautious. Money matters as in where we're earning from and discharging of our zakah. Always to be on the safe side. Even if we discharge a little more, it doesn't hurt. Allah will give us. Even if we discharge a little more, it won't hurt. Allah will always replace it and give us more. We should always be cautious when it comes to zakah. Many people don't know the specific rulings of zakah. I want to make this point. Many people feel like I give charity and that's enough, that's fine. That's not the case. We have to know the specific rulings so we know how much zakah to discharge. Because we may be underpaid. We may be underpaid, so that's why it's important to know the rulings. Listen to this hadith. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam narrates on the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He says, there is no owner of any property who does not pay his zakah, but his property will turn into a bald snake and enclose the neck on the day of judgment. The Prophet then recited the verse, وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ يَبْخَلُونَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ هُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُمْ بَلْ هُوَ شَرٌّ لَهُمْ سَيُطَوَّقُونَ مَا بَخِلُوا بِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Verse of Surah Al-Imran, Allah Ta'ala says, those who hoard their wealth and they are miserly and stingy in terms of what Allah has given them, and they think this is good for them, this is not good for them, this is bad for them, Allah says. سَيُطَوَّقُونَ مَا بَخِلُوا بِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. All of these will be tied around their necks on the day of judgment, and they will fall as a result. They can't hold all of their wealth, they will fall disgraced on the day of judgment. Allah Ta'ala protects us. Listen to this hadith of Tabrani. Ali radiallahu anhu says that Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Allah has enjoined upon rich believers a due to be taken from their properties corresponding to the needs of the poor among them. The poor will never suffer from starvation or lack of clothes unless the rich neglect their duty. If they do, Allah will surely hold them accountable and punish them severely. Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Allah will afflict the nation with drought who does not fulfill its obligation of zakah. Hadith of Sahih Bukhari. Right. Now, the question is, we know from the introduction thus far, zakah is obligatory and mandatory. If a person has a specific amount of wealth, the question arises, which wealth is zakatable? What things do we own upon which zakah is due? I want a pair of clothes, do I give zakat on that? It's a question somebody may ask. I drive a car, I need a car. Do I give zakat on my car? I live in a house. Do I give zakat on the house? I have utensils that I need to use for cooking. I don't cook, the wife does. Do I give zakat on those? I have couches that I sit on. I have a bed that I sleep on. So do I give zakat on that? What is the actual fundamental principle? According to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, zakat will be given on profitable or items that have profit, items that have growth in it. In Arabic it's called al-mal nami, numu, which means it has the ability to grow, fluctuate. Gold, silver, the price of animals, etc. So on and so forth. So we're going to speak about now, inshallah, which wealths are zakatable, which possessions are zakatable, and what possessions are not zakatable. misunderstanding. There is a huge misunderstanding amongst people, so we have to discuss it. So there are three types of possessions. There are possessions that we have that are zakatable, number one. There are possessions that we have that are non-zakatable and part of our basic necessities. Okay? Necessities, car is a necessity. Okay? Clothes for everyday wear is a necessity. Basic food supplies is a necessity. Basic kitchen utensils, necessity. Fridge, cooker, essentials for survival, essentials for our job. These are all, like for example, instruments used by a physician. He needs that for his job. By a carpenter, a construction guy, he has instruments that he needs for his work. Okay. These are basic necessities for his job. They are non-zakatable. Okay. Or for example, you have a scholar that teaches and he needs his books. Those books are non-zakatable. So there are non-zakatable assets that a person has that are forming necessity, basic necessities in his work as well, or in his life. So there's assets that are zakatable, assets that are non-zakatable and basic necessity. And the third type is non-zakatable assets, but beyond one's basic necessities. They're beyond our necessity, but they're not zakatable, like having a fridge, extra fridge. We always have extra fridges, right? Bigger family, we have one fridge, and we have a special freezer for Ramadan. We put all the frozen samosas and our things that we're going to fry, shami gadabs and kabless and everything like that, right? So we put that in one separate freezer. The extra freezer you don't use all year round, the freezer you have in the basement, okay, that's not zakatable. Okay? Extra fridge, it's not zakatable. It's not your necessity, you don't have to have it, you have one already. But it's not zakatable either. Extra cars, that's not zakatable either. Extra microwave, novelties that you own, that's not zakatable. So if a person has an iPad, he has a laptop as well, he has a MacBook as well, that's not zakatable. Right. What are the items upon which zakat is necessary? Okay. So we've already discovered possessions of three types: zakatable possessions, non-zakatable, and non-zakatable. Okay. Non-zakatable that are necessity, non-zakatable beyond necessity, but they are non-zakatable nonetheless. But there was one category that was zakatable, upon which zakat is due. So what are those items? 7 types. 7 items upon which zakat is necessary. Number 1, gold. Number 2, silver. Number 3, currency. The currency that is in use, that has value. Business goods or stock in trade. Okay, so basically, if you're a retail store, you have a retail store, for example, and you're an owner of a retail store. The goods you have for sale, okay, you have to give zakat on the selling cost, not the buying cost. So okay, so you have a retail store, for example, you have a grocery store. Example, you have a grocery store and your inventory is worth, you spent 40 grand on your inventory, but you can make 75 grand on it, or 50 grand, or 55 grand. Zakat will be due on the 55. So business goods or stock in trade. Agricultural produce. Is anybody here that has agricultural produce here? Because we're not going to discuss that too, even when we come to it. Nobody? Okay, we'll move on. Treasure troves. Does anybody have treasure troves here? I don't think so. Okay. You wouldn't be married then otherwise. Okay. Right now, there is something we need to remember. In the time of Rasulullah, there wasn't much difference between the value of gold and silver. Today, the difference between the value of gold and silver is drastic. Huge difference. Yeah. There were dinar and dirham in the time of Rasulullah. So when we look at the nisab is the quantum, the amount of money a person must own for zakat to be necessary upon them. We need to understand a few factors. Currently, there is a difference of opinion amongst the ulama in regards to which rate a person must take for zakat to be farad upon them. But one of the most beautiful principles mentioned by the fuqaha and the jurists is the rate which is more beneficial for the fuqara, for the poor and needy, should be taken. Let's say, for example, if you take the rates of gold, then the amount is extremely high that a person must have for zakat to be farad upon them. It's approximately 3,000 or something, because gold is extremely expensive today, very expensive. It's $7.5, they say, okay, which would be approximately 4.5, no, not 4.5 grams. Let's see.
75.
Okay. 87 grams, okay, 3.08 ounces, okay. 87.48, so 87.5 grams of gold is very expensive. If we take the rate of silver, then it's 612.36 grams of silver. And that is approximately today, when I did the research, it was $370. It goes up and down, of course it fluctuates, but silver is very far off from gold. The value of silver is very far off from the value of gold. So now the question is, which rate do we take to make zakat farad on someone? By which rate do we go for zakat to be farad on me? Let's talk individually, as a first person. Take the lower rate, why? Because it benefits more people. So there's more people that have $370 in their assets combined. Their assets combined. There are more people that have $370 aside from their necessities, because that's another condition. That the wealth that you have accumulated is aside from your daily needs. And daily needs are your instruments you use for work, your food, your clothing, your shelter, your utilities, your bills for that month, that particular month, not for the whole year. Not for the whole year, yeah? Not for 2 years, because everyone says, oh, I have utilities to pay for the whole year. For that particular month in which zakat is due upon you. We're going to talk about that as well. When is zakat due upon a person? Everybody thinks it's Ramadan is zakat time. Not necessarily. People discharge their zakat in Ramadan for extra benefits, because Ramadan is a month where rewards are multiplied. So a person gives their zakat in Ramadan and their reward is multiplied, that's fine. But zakat is not necessarily due in Ramadan. Every person has their individual zakat due date. And we're going to speak about that as well, inshallah. If we take the value of silver as the benchmark or the quantum for nisab is the rate upon which zakat is farad on the individual, then more people will be receiving zakat, because there are more people that have $370 as opposed to people that have 87.5 grams of gold. So that's why it's better to take the rate of silver. As I said, there are some scholars that take the rate of gold, but then what that will do is it will make less people eligible for, less people will be ordained for giving zakat. Right. There's a term that we need to understand, because it's going to come up a lot. Malik of Nisab. Malik means owner, possessor of Nisab. And Nisab is the quantum. So who is a Sahib al-Nisab or Malik al-Nisab? Sahib al-Nisab is another term. Sahib al-Nisab or Malik al-Nisab is a person that possesses that amount, that Nisab amount, 370 in our case. 370 aside from their needs and necessities. This person is called Malik of Nisab. This term is going to come again and again, that's why we're going to inshallah. That's why I'm explaining it. There are 3 types of people concerning zakat. One person is the owner of nisab, he has to give zakat. One person that does not own nisab, and he's also eligible to receive zakat. There are some people who don't own nisab, but they are not eligible for zakat, to receive zakat either. So there's 3 people. There's a person who has to give zakat. He owns a nisab. There is one group of people that don't have anything, and they're also eligible to receive. There is a third type of people that doesn't have enough to give zakat, but they have enough where they're not eligible to receive zakat. So these are three types of people. Okay, now, this is now going to be details about zakat. conditions of the one giving zakah, conditions of the wealth, conditions of giving zakah, and conditions for the eligibility of receiving zakah. These are 4 categories that we will now be discussing. Now, who has to give zakah? The person who gives zakah has to be free. A slave doesn't give zakah. And this is, right now we don't discuss this because we don't see slavery is not prevailing. It's not even, it doesn't happen. But earlier in Islam, there was still some people that were in slavery, so that they weren't giving zakah. Number 2, because they're not owning anything, so they can't give zakah, of course. Number 2, Islam. A person has to be Muslim for them to give zakah. Non-Muslims don't give zakah. Even in Islamic states, non-Muslims don't give zakah. They give jizya, but not zakah. Number 3, age of puberty. Okay, a person has to be mature. The wealth of a child, zakah is not due upon it. Zakah is not due upon the wealth of a child. There's a difference of opinion amongst the fuqaha on this, by the way. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says the wealth of the child, zakah is not due upon it. The other fuqaha will say that the guardian will give zakah on behalf of the child as well, because it's still wealth. Sanity. A person if he's majnoon, he won't give zakat. I already gave you the definition of majnoon last time, right? My own definition. What's the definition of majnoon? Does anybody remember? Last time in the fiqh of Ramadan class, I explained what majnoon was. Who's a majnoon? If you want to see somebody's majnoon or not, give him money, see what he does with it. If he keeps it, he's not majnoon. He gives it back to you, he's majnoon. Right? So the condition for giving zakah, number 1, he has to be a free person. Islam, mature, has to have reached the age of puberty. Sane, and he has to own the nisab, number 5. And number 6, absence of exhaustive debts. Absence of exhaustive debts. And we're going to explain what that means. Now here's one. Each adult must pay their zakah separately. Which means if a wife owns lots of jewelry, she must be giving zakat on her jewelry. It's her obligation. But let's make a disclaimer here, or let's just explain this further. I remember I mentioned this a few years back, and some of the sisters were not happy with this. Saying, we don't work. We don't work. They said, we don't work, so how are we going to give zakah? You don't have to give zakah in cash. You can also give your jewelry in zakah. You can also give gold in zakah and silver in zakah. What generally happens is that, some people think, this is so biased, it's so precious. But some people like to hoard gold and silver, they like to buy it. And then the man has to give the zakat. If you want gold and silver, you pay zakat on it every year. If you want gold and silver and you always want to buy more gold, then you pay zakat on it. Why do you have to make your husband pay zakat on it? It's not his obligation. The obligation is upon you to pay zakat, not on the husband. So each adult must pay their zakat separately. Wife must calculate and pay her own zakat. And many sisters are also earning nowadays. So even in this, there's an equality, 50-50 earning, but the husband has to pay the zakat. That's not very fair. Absence of exhaustive debts. Absence of debts are not necessary, according to Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says, absence of debts is necessary. If somebody has a debt that is due upon the wealth, then you have to pay off that debt and then discharge zakah if you have remaining amount that meets the rate of nisab. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah has this view. Imam Shafi'i says absence of debts is not necessary, thus they are not deductible. Now, which type of debts can be deducted from the zakah, from the wealth? Say, for example, now a person has $50,000. A man has $50,000 and he has had that wealth for a year. Okay. And I'm going to explain what that condition means as well, because one of the conditions for zakat is hawlan al-hawl, which means the passing of 1 year. Does that mean 1 year has to pass with every paycheck that you earn? No. What it means is when a person becomes malik of nisab for the first time, the first time you own 370 in today's rate, today's market, aside from your needs, 1 year will be calculated from that day onwards. So for example, on the 15th of Sha'ban, which is a famous date, okay? Controversial date, 15th of Sha'ban, for example. You became a Malik of Nisab. You had $370 at the beginning of on 15th of Sha'ban for the first time. Then you would calculate the year according to the lunar calendar, Qamari, not Shamsi. Next year, 15th or 14th of Sha'ban, when the year has come to an end, you will look at your money. How much do you have now? If you have more than that 20 grand or 50 grand or whatever you had at the beginning, you started off with 2 grand or whatever. If you have more, the entire wealth will be accumulated together. So wealth of the same kind will be accumulated. Wealth of the same category will be accumulated together throughout the year. And it's not necessary for 1 year to pass on every single penny of that same wealth. So you started off the year with dollars or cash. You started off the year with cash. The first time you became Malik of Islam, 15th of Sha'ban, it was you had $1,000 cash aside from your needs. During the year, that money increased. And by next 15th of Sha'ban, whatever you have, you will give zakat. If during the year, the money went down even below the nisab, it went below the nisab. The nisab is what? 370. It went below the nisab, it doesn't matter. If by the end of that year you have more than the nisab, you will give zakat on that amount. Now, if during the year your wealth diminishes completely, your balance went to zero, then it will be recalculated. If you become Malik of Nisab again, that date will start again. So, I'm going to explain. 15th of Sha'ban came. First time I'm earning money. I'm 25, whatever, 23, 24. I got my first job, and I've got my first paycheck or second paycheck, whatever. And now I'm realizing that I'm saving money. Aside from all of my expenses, my utilities, and anything else that I'm paying, I discovered that I have $500 in my savings. The nisab is 370, I have 500 in my savings. And what's the date? The date is 1st of Sha'ban. Let's just say 1st of Sha'ban. Now, during the year, that wealth increased. From 500 it went to 1,000, it went to 1,500, it went to 2,000. Following year, 1st of Sha'ban came, and my balance was 2,000 in my savings. Then I will give zakat on 2,000. Because you can't calculate each individual penny that you receive. So zakat, wealth of the same type, will all accumulate together. Now, for example, if you purchase some gold during the year as well, that gold amount won't combine with the cash. 1 year will be calculated on the gold, because gold is a different type of an asset. It's a different asset. Do you understand the point we're trying to make here? It's a different asset. Therefore, the zakat on gold will be calculated differently than the zakat that will be calculated for the cash. So wealth that is accumulated. So now, for example, at the beginning of the year, when you became Malik in Islam, you had $500, and you didn't have any gold. You just had $500. At the end of the first year, when your 1 year comes to an end, and zakat due date arrives, you only have cash, but you also have some gold, and that gold was only purchased 2 months before. Then that will not be included in the zakat amount. It will not accumulate with the cash. Okay. In fact, 1 year will be calculated on that gold that you received as well, that gold that you bought, that you purchased with your own. Okay. So debts that may be deducted. Which debts can be excluded from the assets when the zakat due date comes? Number one, price of goods that have been purchased. So if you're in business or you're in whatever you do in your work, and you have purchased some goods for your business, those objects, the price of those objects that you still owe, for anything you've purchased, can be deducted from zakat. Which means, say for example, you use your credit card. You use your credit card and you pay your credit card by the end of the month. it's $1,000 or $500 or $750, doesn't matter. You are allowed to deduct that amount. So price of goods purchased can be deducted. Rent due. Rent that is due upon you is a debt. Now it becomes a debt. Rent was due first of the month, it becomes a debt. So you can deduct that amount from zakat for that particular month. You can't deduct rent for the entire year from your assets. Okay? Same goes for mortgage. Okay? If you're in a mortgage and you have mortgage, at least the actual amount, the principal amount, not the interest amount, at least the principal amount for that month or the month after the month that you're giving zakat can be deducted from your assets. Okay? Utility bills for that particular month. So say for example, I'm giving my zakat on the 5th of Sha'ban every year, that's my zakat due date. But I have some utilities that are due upon me. Those utility bills, the amount of those utility bills can also be deducted from my assets. Mahar owed to the wife, if you have intentions to pay it. Okay. If you owe your wife mahar and you have intentions to pay it, you should have intentions to pay it because it's a dain, it's a qadr. If you owe your wife mahar, it's a qadr, by the way. We have to remember that. Some people think it's forgiven. What's mine is mine, what's yours is mine. That principle, okay? It only works the other way around. If a woman says it works, if a man says it doesn't work. Okay? So we know that from experience, life experience. It only works when a woman says it, not when a man says it. Okay? Right. So mahar you owe to the wife, it's a dain, it's a qadr. It's actually taken from your mirath, from your inheritance. If you die and you didn't pay her, she has that right as a qadr. It's a dain on you. It's a dain, it's a debt on your shoulders. So if you owe your wife mahar, that can be deducted from your assets. Okay. Taxes due. If you have taxes that are due upon you, you can deduct that from your assets as well. Personal debts. If you owe somebody some money, that can also be deducted from your assets. Like I mentioned, commercial loans minus interest. If borrowed to buy zakat of assets, like raw materials, for example, or finished goods, they are also deductible. If borrowed to buy non-zakat assets like machinery, etc., they are not deductible. So, of course, commercial loans and also loans that debts like mortgage or student loan minus interest for that particular month of payment can be deducted from a person's assets. So the conditions for the wealth. So right now we just mentioned basically what do we do right now with the conditions for giving zakat. The conditions are person has to be sane, free, Muslim, mature, so on. So that's the individual. Now the wealth. What are the conditions for the wealth? The wealth must be zakat, number one. So it has to be one of those 7 categories that we mentioned earlier, 7 types of wealth on which zakat can be due. The wealth must be equivalent to or exceed the amount of nisab, the quantum, the amount that we mentioned earlier, which was, in today's market, $370. Number 3, lapse of a lunar year. I'll explain to you what that means, lapse of a lunar year. Lapse of a lunar year means from the date that you became the possessor of nisab, 1 lunar year. That's what we mean by lapse of a year. Zakatable wealth. Which types of wealth? Let's repeat that again. Gold, silver, currency, business goods or stock in trade, agricultural produce, livestock, and treasure trove. Now, gold and silver. Gold and silver in any form, whether raw or in the form of coins, cutlery, utensils, jewelry, zakat will be due upon it. For whatever purpose, whether it's for investment, novelty, decoration, personal use, sit in the deposit box, zakat will be due upon it because it's still a valuable wealth. Some ulama say, and I'm just going to mention this opinion because I don't want anybody to say that I'm an injustice. Imam Shafi'i, I believe, is of the opinion that jewelry must be at least 50% pure. The gold and silver must be at least 50% pure. White gold is 75% pure. So white gold is zakatable. But there is no zakat on any other metals, no matter how valued they are, or stones, no matter how valuable they are. Diamonds, there's no zakat on it. Okay? So sisters are going to say, buy me some diamonds now. Maybe says her husband, you have to give zakat, you buy me diamonds. But the resale value is very bad. If you try to resell diamonds, you won't get nothing. Even if you go back the next day. Platinum, despite its value in the market, it's just a metal. It's not gold. It's not gold or silver, so zakat is not due upon it. Currency, for whatever purpose a person has currency, zakat is due upon it. Whether the currency is stored away at home, to avoid Uncle Sam, or in the banks, it's still zakatable. Doesn't matter what country the currency is from. Any country, as long as it is in use. As long as this is in use. Even if you have cash deposited aside for your daughter's wedding, because we have the habit of spending $50, $75, $100,000. Even if you have zakat stored away for some important event, zakat is due upon it if you still have that wealth and zakat due date arrives. Zakat due date arrives and you have that wealth, even if it was for Hajj, for a wedding, whatever, you have to give zakat on it. Even if you save it to buy a house. People save money to buy a house. If zakat due date comes and you have that money, you have to give zakat on it. Even if that wealth is deposited in trusts, mutual funds or anything, we're going to go through it later. Rent that you receive from real estate. So many people have rental properties. If you have a rental property, zakat is due upon the rent amount, not the house itself. Zakat is due upon the rent amount, not the house itself. Okay? And of course, you can deduct from that your annual, what you pay, insurance, of course, property insurance, maintenance, whatever money you're giving in maintenance of the house, you can deduct those amounts. And then you give on whatever you saved. It will be accumulated with the rest of the cash that you have. How about if a person purchases a home with the intention of, he doesn't have any intention at the time of purchasing, he just purchases a home, then zakat is not due upon it. If a person purchases a home to sell it, then zakat will be due upon the value of the house. Okay? So this is about the intention you make at the time of purchasing the home. Debts receivable. Debts receivable, zakat is due upon it. What does debts receivable mean? You gave somebody a loan, and now you are going to receive that amount. If there is a very strong inclination or strong hope of receiving that amount, then zakat will be due upon it. If there is no strong hope, you don't know, you're not sure, zakat will not be due upon it until you receive that amount, then zakat will be discharged for all the previous years as well. Zakat will be discharged for all the previous years as well. Right. Debts receivables are zakatable if there are loans that are advanced with the hope of repayment, or they are receivables from the sale of commercial goods. Okay. Then zakat will be due upon it. And as I mentioned, one may, however, pay the zakat once those goods are received, but all the previous years, once the money is received, but all the previous years will have to be calculated as well. Right. Some debts receivables are not eligible for zakat, are not zakatable. So which ones are they? Loans advanced without any hope of repayment and or without any proof. So there's no zakat due upon. Used personal belongings sold and awaiting payment. Okay, so say for example, you're selling your laptop and you haven't received the money yet, and your zakat due date comes. Zakat won't be due upon that money you haven't received yet. Until you receive it, then you give zakat. Okay. Wages, fees, remuneration of services. Zakat is not due upon it. Just because I know I'm going to get a paycheck at the end of this month or next month, then I calculate that in my zakat assets. That's not necessary. Mahar owed to the wife. Okay. So the wife won't give zakat on this. She doesn't know when she's going to get it. She won't get it at all. So she won't calculate it in my zakat every year. Inheritance shares. So inheritance, somebody passed away and you're eligible for inheritance. Business goods. Anything bought with the intention of reselling, if at the time of buying the intention to resell was not made, it would not be a business good. So sometimes you buy something and you don't have the intention of selling it. But only later on your intention changes because you see that it's a profitable thing. So if at the time of buying it your intention was not to resell, it will not be considered a business good. So therefore zakat will not be to your profits. Now stocks, shares that are bought for capital gain, then how is zakat be calculated? Zakat will be calculated according to the market value on that particular day of your zakat. So for example, you bought a share for $100, okay? And that share during your zakat due date, the market value of that share is 150. You will give zakat on the 150. You won't give zakat on $100. Now, for example, if you buy shares for long-term investment, then the company that you're investing with, the non-zakatable assets of the company may be deducted from the market value. Okay, so if you buy stocks of a company that, they use different materials to produce whatever they're producing, and you have a share with that company. So the non-zakatable machinery and whatever has been used and money has been invested in those instruments, that amount can be deducted from the market value of the share. So example, market value of a share is 100. Okay. The building is $30 from that, $30 of machinery, manufactured goods are $15,